Section 1 of Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Tractatus Logico Philosophicus by Ludwig Wittgenstein. Translated by C.K. Ogden. Section 1. Preface. This book will perhaps only be understood by those who have themselves already thought the thoughts which are expressed in it, or similar thoughts. It is therefore not a textbook. Its object would be attained if it afforded pleasure to one who read it with understanding. The book deals with the problems of philosophy and shows, as I believe, that the method of formulating these problems rests on the misunderstanding of the logic of our language. Its whole meaning could be summed up somewhat as follows. What can be said at all can be said clearly, and whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. The book will, therefore, draw a limit to thinking, or rather, not to thinking, but to the expression of thoughts, for, in order to draw a limit to thinking, we should have to be able to think both sides of this limit. We should therefore have to be able to think what cannot be thought. The limit can, therefore, only be drawn in language, and what lies on the other side of the limit will be simply nonsense. How far my efforts agree with those of other philosophers I will not decide. Indeed, what I have here written makes no claim to novelty in points of detail, and therefore I give no sources, because it is indifferent to me whether what I have thought has already been thought before me by another. I will only mention that to the great works of Frege, and the writings of my friend Bertrand Russell, I owe in large measure the stimulation of my thoughts. If this work has a value, it consists in two things. First, that in it thoughts are expressed, and this value will be greater the better the thoughts are expressed, the more the nail has been hit on the head. Here I am conscious that I have fallen far short of the possible, simply because my powers are insufficient to cope with the task. May others come and do it better. On the other hand, the truth of the thoughts communicated here seems to me unassailable and definitive. I am, therefore, of the opinion that the problems have in essentials been finally solved. And if I am not mistaken in this, then the value of this work secondly consists in the fact that it shows how little has been done when these problems have been solved. L. W. Vienna, 1918. 1. The world is everything that is the case. 1.1. The world is the totality of facts, not of things. 1.11. The world is determined by the facts, and by these being all the facts. 1.12. For the totality of facts determines both what is the case, and also all that is not the case. 1.13. The facts in logical space are the world. 1.2. The world divides into facts. 1.21. Anyone can either be the case or not be the case, and everything else remain the same. 2. What is the case, the fact, is the existence of atomic facts. 2.01. An atomic fact is a combination of objects, entities, things, 2.011. It is essential to a thing that it can be a constituent part of an atomic fact. 2.012. In logic, nothing is accidental. If a thing can occur in an atomic fact, the possibility of that atomic fact must already be prejudged in the thing. 2.0121. It would, so to speak, appear as an accident, when to a thing that could exist alone on its own account, subsequently a state of affairs could be made to fit. If things can occur in atomic facts, this possibility must already lie in them. A logical entity cannot be merely possible. Logic treats of every possibility, and all possibilities are its facts. Just as we cannot think of spatial objects at all apart from space, or temporal objects apart from time, so we cannot think of any object apart from the possibility of its connexion with other things. If I can think of an object in the context of an atomic fact, I cannot think of it apart from the possibility of this context. 2.0122. The thing is independent, insofar as it can occur in all possible circumstances, but this form of independence is a form of connexion with the atomic fact, a form of dependence. (It is impossible for words to occur in two different ways, alone and in the proposition). 2.0123. If I know an object, then I also know all the possibilities of its occurrence in atomic facts. Every such possibility must lie in the nature of the object. A new possibility cannot subsequently be found. 2.01231. In order to know an object, I must know not its external, but all its internal qualities. 2.0124. If all objects are given, then thereby are all possible atomic facts also given. 2.013. Everything is, as it were, in a space of possible atomic facts. I can think of this space as empty, but not of the thing without the space. 2.0131. A spatial object must lie in infinite space. (A point in space is an argument place). A speck in a visual field need not be red, but it must have a colour. It has, so to speak, a colour space round it. A tone must have a pitch. The object of the sense of touch a hardness, etc. 2.014. Objects contain the possibility of all states of affairs. 2.0141. The possibility of its occurrence in atomic facts is the form of the object. 2.02. The object is simple. 2.0201. Every statement about complexes can be analyzed into a statement about their constituent parts, and into those propositions which completely describe the complexes. 2.021. Objects form the substance of the world, therefore they cannot be compound. 2.0211. If the world had no substance, then whether a proposition had sense would depend on whether another proposition was true. 2.0212. It would then be impossible to form a picture of the world, (true or false). 2.022. It is clear that, however different from the real one an imagined world may be, it must have something, a form, in common with the real world. 2.023. This fixed form consists of the objects. 2.0231. The substance of the world can only determine a form, and not any material properties, for these are first presented by the propositions, first formed by the configuration of the objects. 2.0232. Roughly speaking, objects are colourless. 2.0233. Two objects of the same logical form are, apart from their external properties, only differentiated from one another in that they are different. 2.02331. Either a thing has properties which no other has, and then one can distinguish it straight away from the others by a description and refer to it, or, on the other hand, there are several things which have the totality of their properties in common, and then it is quite impossible to point to any one of them. For if a thing is not distinguished by anything, I cannot distinguish it, for otherwise it would be distinguished. 2.024. Substance is what exists independently of what is the case. 2.025. It is form and content. 2.0251. Space, time, and colour (coloredness) are forms of objects. 2.026. Only if there are objects can there be a fixed form of the world. 2.027. The fixed, the existent, and the object are one. 2.0271. The object is the fixed, the existent. The configuration is the changing, the variable. 2.0272. The configuration of the objects forms the atomic fact. 2.03. In the atomic fact, objects hang one in another, like the links of a chain. 2.031. In the atomic fact, the objects are combined in a definite way. 2.032. The way in which objects hang together in the atomic fact is the structure of the atomic fact. 2.033. The form is the possibility of the structure. 2.034. The structure of the fact consists of the structures of the atomic facts. 2.04. The totality of existent atomic facts is the world. 2.05. The totality of existent atomic facts also determines which atomic facts do not exist. 2.06. The existence and non-existence of atomic facts is the reality. Bracket. The existence of atomic facts we also call a positive fact, their non-existence a negative fact. Close bracket. 2.061. Atomic facts are independent of one another. 2.062. From the existence or non-existence of an atomic fact, we cannot infer the existence or non-existence of another. 2.063. The total reality is the world. 2.1. We make to ourselves pictures of facts. 2.11. The picture presents the facts in logical space, the existence and non-existence of atomic facts. 2.12. The picture is a model of reality. 2.13. To the objects correspond in the picture the elements of the picture. 2.131. The elements of the picture stand in the picture for the objects. 2.14. The picture consists in the fact that its elements are combined with one another in a definite way. 2.141. The picture is a fact. 2.15. That the elements of the picture are combined with one another in a definite way represents that the things are so combined with one another. This connection of the elements of the picture is called its structure, and the possibility of this structure is called the form of representation of the picture. 2.151. The form of representation is the possibility that the things are combined with one another, as are the elements of the picture. 2.1511. Thus the picture is linked with reality. It reaches up to it. 2.1512. It is like a scale applied to reality. 2.15121. Only the outermost points of the dividing lines touch the object to be measured. 2.1513. According to this view, the representing relation which makes it a picture also belongs to the picture. 2.1514. The representing relation consists of the coordinations of the elements of the picture and the things. 2.1515. These coordinations are, as it were, the feelers of its elements, with which the picture touches reality. 2.16. In order to be a picture, a fact must have something in common with what it pictures. 2.161. In the picture and the pictured, there must be something identical in order that the one can be a picture of the other at all. 2.17. What the picture must have in common with reality in order to be able to represent it after its manner, rightly or falsely, is its form of representation. 2.171. The picture can represent every reality whose form it has. The spatial picture, everything spatial. The colored, everything colored, etc. 2.172. The picture, however, cannot represent its form of representation. It shows it forth. 2.173. The picture represents its object from without, bracket. Its standpoint is its form of representation, close bracket. Therefore, the picture represents its object rightly or falsely. 2.174. But the picture cannot place itself outside of its form of representation. 2.18. What every picture, of whatever form, must have in common with reality in order to be able to represent it at all, rightly or falsely, is the logical form, that is, the form of reality. 2.181. If the form of representation is the logical form, then the picture is called a logical picture. 2.182. Every picture is also a logical picture. Bracket, on the other hand, for example, Not every picture is spatial. 2.19. The logical picture can depict the world. 2.2. The picture has the logical form of representation in common with what it pictures. 2.201. The picture depicts reality by representing a possibility of the existence and non-existence of atomic facts. 2.202. The picture represents a possible state of affairs in logical space. 2.203. The picture contains the possibility of the state of affairs which it represents. 2.21. The picture agrees with reality or not. It is right or wrong, true or false. 2.22. The picture represents what it represents, independently of its truth or falsehood, through the form of representation. 2.221. What the picture represents is its sense. 2.222. In the agreement or disagreement of its sense with reality, its truth or falsity consists. 2.223. In order to discover whether the picture is true or false, we must compare it with reality. 2.224. It cannot be discovered from the picture alone whether it is true or false. 2.225. There is no picture which is a priori true. 3. The logical picture of the facts is the thought. 3.001. An atomic fact is thinkable, means we can imagine it. 3.01. The totality of true thoughts is a picture of the world. 3.02. The thought contains the possibility of the state of affairs which it thinks. What is thinkable is also possible. 3.03. We cannot think anything unlogical, for otherwise we should have to think unlogically. 3.031. It used to be said that God could create everything except what was contrary to the laws of logic. The truth is, we could not say of an unlogical world how it would look. 3.032. To present in language anything which contradicts logic is as impossible as in geometry to present by its coordinates a figure which contradicts the laws of space, or to give the coordinates of a point which does not exist. 3.0321. We could represent spatially an atomic fact which contradicted the laws of physics, but not one which contradicted the laws of geometry. 3.04. An a priori true thought would be one whose possibility guaranteed its truth. 3.05. Only we could know a priori that a thought is true if its truth was to be recognized from the thought itself (without an object of comparison). 3.1. In the proposition, the thought is expressed perceptibly through the senses. 3.11. We use the sensibly perceptible sign (sound or written sign, etc.) of the proposition as a projection of the possible state of affairs. The method of projection is the thinking of the sense of the proposition. 3.12. The sign through which we express the thought I call the proposition sign, and the proposition is the proposition sign in its projective relation to the world. 3.13. To the proposition belongs everything which belongs to the projection, but not what is projected. Therefore, the possibility of what is projected, but not this itself. In the proposition, therefore, its sense is not yet contained, but the possibility of expressing it. The content of the proposition means the content of the significant proposition. In the proposition, the form of its sense is contained, but not its content. 3.14. The propositional sign consists in the fact that its elements, the words, are combined in it in a definite way. The propositional sign is a fact. 3.141. The proposition is not a mixture of words, just as the musical theme is not a mixture of tones, The proposition is articulate. 3.142. Only facts can express a sense. A class of names cannot. 3.143. That the propositional sign is a fact is concealed by the ordinary form of expression, written or printed. For in the printed proposition, for example, the sign of a proposition does not appear essentially different from a word. Thus it was possible for Frege to call the proposition a compounded name. 3.1431. The essential nature of the propositional sign becomes very clear when we imagine it made up of spatial objects, (such as tables, chairs, books), instead of written signs. The mutual spatial position of these things then expresses the sense of the proposition. 3.1432. We must not say, "The complex sign A says, A stands in relation R to B," but we must say, that A stands in a certain relation to B says that ARB. 3.144. States of affairs can be described, but not named. Names resemble points. Propositions resemble arrows. They have senses. 3.2. In propositions, thoughts can be so expressed that to the objects of the thoughts correspond the elements of the propositional sign. 3.201. These elements I call simple signs, and the proposition completely analyzed. 3.202. The simple signs employed in propositions are called names. 3.203. The name means the object. The object is its meaning. A is the same sign as A. 3.21. To the configuration of the simple signs in the propositional sign corresponds the configuration of the objects in the state of affairs. 3.22. In the proposition, the name represents the object. 3.221. Objects I can only name. Signs represent them. I can only speak of them. I cannot assert them. A proposition can only say how a thing is, not what it is. 3.23. The postulate of the possibility of the simple signs is the postulate of the determinateness of the sense. 3.24. A proposition about a complex stands in internal relation to the proposition about its constituent part. A complex can only be given by its description, and this will either be right or wrong. The proposition in which there is mention of a complex, if this does not exist, becomes not nonsense, but simply false. That a propositional element signifies a complex can be seen from an indeterminateness in the propositions in which it occurs. We know that everything is not yet determined by this proposition. The notation for generality contains a prototype. The combination of the symbols of a complex in a simple symbol can be expressed by a definition. 3.25. There is one and only one complete analysis of the proposition. 3.251. The proposition expresses what it expresses in a definite and clearly specifiable way. The proposition is articulate. 3.26. The name cannot be analyzed further by any definition. It is a primitive sign. 3.261. Every defined sign signifies, via those signs by which it is defined, and the definitions show the way. Two signs, one a primitive sign, and one defined by primitive signs, cannot signify in the same way. Names cannot be taken to pieces by definition, nor any sign which alone and independently has a meaning. 3.262. What does not get expressed in the sign is shown by its application. What the signs conceal, their application declares. 3.263. The meanings of primitive signs can be explained by elucidations. Elucidations are propositions which contain the primitive signs. They can, therefore, only be understood when the meanings of these signs are already known. 3.3. Only the proposition has sense. Only in the context of a proposition has a name meaning. 3.31. Every part of a proposition which characterizes its sense I call an expression, (a symbol), (bracket), the proposition itself is an expression, Expressions are everything, essential for the sense of the proposition, that propositions can have in common with one another. An expression characterizes a form and a content. 3.311. An expression presupposes the forms of all propositions in which it can occur. It is the common characteristic mark of a class of propositions. 3.312. It is therefore represented by the general form of the propositions which it characterizes, and in this form the expression is constant and everything else variable. 3.313. An expression is thus presented by a variable, whose values are the propositions which contain the expression. In the limiting case, the variable becomes constant, the expression a proposition. I call such a variable a propositional variable. 3.314. An expression has meaning only in a proposition. Every variable can be conceived as a propositional variable, including the variable name. 3.315. If we change a constituent part of a proposition into a variable, there is a class of propositions which are all the values of the resulting variable proposition. This class in general still depends on what, by arbitrary agreement, we mean by parts of that proposition. But if we change all those signs, whose meaning was arbitrarily determined, into variables, there always remains such a class. But this is now no longer dependent on any agreement. It depends only on the nature of the proposition. It corresponds to a logical form, to a logical prototype. 3.316. What values the propositional variable can assume is determined. The determination of the values is the variable. 3.317. The determination of the values of the propositional variable is done by indicating the propositions whose common mark the variable is. The determination is a description of these propositions. The determination will therefore deal only with symbols, not with their meanings. And only this is essential to the determination, that is only a description of symbols, and asserts nothing about what is symbolized. The way in which we describe the propositions is not essential. 3.318. I conceive the proposition, like Frege and Russell, as a function of the expressions contained in it. 3.32. The sign is the part of the symbol perceptible by the senses. 3.321. Two different symbols can therefore have the sign, the written sign or the sound sign, in common. They then signify in different ways. 3.322. It can never indicate the common characteristic of two objects that we symbolize them with the same signs, but by different methods of symbolizing. For the sign is arbitrary. We could therefore equally well choose two different signs, and where then would be what was common in the symbolization? 3.323. In the language of everyday life, it very often happens that the same word signifies in two different ways, and therefore belongs to two different symbols, or that two words, which signify in different ways, are apparently applied in the same way in the proposition. Thus the word is appears as the copula, as the sign of equality, and as the expression of existence. To exist, as an intransitive verb like to go, identical as an adjective. We speak of something, but also of the fact of something happening. In the proposition green is green, where the first word is a proper name as the last an adjective, these words have not merely different meanings, but they are different symbols. 3.324. Thus there easily arise the most fundamental confusions, of which the whole of philosophy is full. 3.325. In order to avoid these errors, we must employ a symbolism which excludes them, by not applying the same sign in different symbols, and by not applying signs in the same way which signify in different ways. A symbolism, that is to say, which obeys the rules of logical grammar, of logical syntax. The logical symbolism of Frege and Russell is such a language, which, however, does still not exclude all errors. 3.326. In order to recognize the symbol in the sign, we must consider the significant use. 3.327. The sign determines a logical form only together with its logical syntactic application. 3.328. If a sign is not necessary, then it is meaningless. That is the meaning of Occam's razor (if everything in the symbolism works as though a sign had meaning, then it has meaning). 3.33. In logical syntax, the meaning of a sign ought never to play a role. It must admit of being established without mention being thereby made of the meaning of a sign. It ought to presuppose only the description of the expressions. 3.331. From this observation we get a further view into Russell's theory of types. Russell's error is shown by the fact that in drawing up his symbolic rules, he has to speak about the things his signs mean. 3.332. No proposition can say anything about itself, because the propositional sign cannot be contained in itself (that is the whole theory of types). 3.333. A function cannot be its own argument, because the functional sign already contains the prototype of its own argument, and it cannot contain itself. If, for example, we suppose that the function F fx could be its own argument, then there would be a proposition F F fx and in this the outer function F and the inner function F must have different meanings, for the inner has the form fx, the outer the form fx. Common to both functions is only the letter F, which by itself signifies nothing. This is at once clear if instead of F U we write there exists symbol phi F phi U end symbol phi U equals F U. Herewith Russell's paradox vanishes. 3.334. The rules of logical syntax must follow of themselves, if we only know how every single sign signifies. 3.34. A proposition possesses essential and accidental features. Accidental are the features which are due to a particular way of producing the propositional sign. Essential are those which alone enable the proposition to express its sense. 3.341. The essential in a proposition is therefore that which is common to all propositions which can express the same sense. And in the same way in general, the essential in a symbol is that which all symbols which can fulfill the same purpose have in common. 3.3411. One could therefore say the real name is that which all symbols which signify an object have in common. It would then follow, step by step, that no sort of composition was essential for a name. 3.342. In our notations there is indeed something arbitrary, but this is not arbitrary, namely, that if we have determined anything arbitrarily, then something else must be the case. This results from the essence of the notation. 3.3421. A particular method of symbolizing may be unimportant, but it is always important that this is a possible method of symbolizing, and this happens as a rule in philosophy. A single thing proves over and over again to be unimportant, but the possibility of every single thing reveals something about the nature of the world. 3.343. Definitions are rules for the translation of one language into another. Every correct symbolism must be translatable into every other according to such rules. It is this which all have in common. 3.344. What signifies in the symbol is what is common to all those symbols by which it can be replaced according to the rules of logical syntax. 3.3441. We can, for example, express what is common to all notations for the truth functions as follows. It is common to them that they all, for example, can be replaced by the notations of quotes, not symbol p, bracket, quote, not p, close quote, close bracket, and quote, p or symbol q, close quote, bracket, quote, p or q, close quote, close bracket. Bracket, herewith is indicated the way in which a special possible notation can give us general information, close bracket. 3.3442. The sign of the complex is not arbitrarily resolved in the analysis, in such a way that its resolution would be different in every propositional structure. 3.4. The proposition determines a place in logical space. The existence of this logical place is guaranteed by the existence of the constituent parts alone, by the existence of the significant proposition. 3.41. The propositional sign and the logical coordinates, that is, the logical place. 3.411. The geometrical and the logical place agree in that each is the possibility of an existence. 3.42. Although a proposition may only determine one place in logical space, the whole logical space must already be given by it. Bracket, otherwise denial, the logical sum, the logical product, etc. would always introduce new elements in coordination, close bracket. Bracket, the logical scaffolding round the picture determines the logical space. The proposition reaches through the whole logical space, close bracket. 3.5. The applied thought propositional sign is the thought. End of section 1. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards.